Alright, Evie and I are back for another Outriders video this time. We are just a couple days away from launch here, and I kind of wanted to get into the territory of where my head is at going into this release based on a month of a very lengthy demo and, well, lengthy in terms of how much you could grind it potentially, and all the copious amounts of preview materials they've given us. There has been a lot of featured content for Outriders. They have shown off, I don't know, at least 15, 20 legendary weapons. They have given us, I don't know, 4 or 5 armor sets. And if you really looked for things, what she's doing, if you really look for things, you could probably find at least 30 legendary weapons and a couple different legendary armor sets they haven't shown off yet. They've been going through endgame builds and kind of strategy. They gave MTash a whole bunch of like exclusive class preview videos that you can watch that are really extensive. So they are going very hard, shall we say. Where I've ended up here is I think I'm kind of at, I would say, medium plus expectations for Outriders, in that I have been burned so many times before, as we all have, by various looters that did not live up to their potential. But I think there are less or fewer red flags this time around than there have been for some past games. I never really quite understood what Godfall was trying to be, and the previews were like very uncomfortably limited to the point where I didn't really understand anything about the game or its endgame, and it turned out it was not good. Same kind of goes for Avengers. That was an interesting case because everyone was kind of complaining about how the characters looked and stuff, but actually the base story campaign was fantastic. It's just that they didn't really have a coherent endgame, and the live service stuff hasn't panned out yet, which was kind of obvious from the previews. But in this case, I just think that they have gotten enough in where we can kind of understand what the ultimate plan is for the game, and they are going on and on and on about how they're not live service and they're trying to launch a complete game, which I think everyone is looking forward to. From what I've played so far and from the preview materials about the end game, I would expect to fully max all 4 characters in this game and grind the end game with each of them. That may sound pretty basic, but that is a hard sell for a lot of people, and to get all the way through what sounds like a pretty lengthy campaign and grind the end game. And with the way these things work, that is at least 100 hours, I'm guessing, if not closer to 100, 150. That's not saying a ton because I'm the guy who put 100 hours into Avengers and Anthem and all those games, so it's not exactly a tall order for me. But I am feeling ultimately better going into it than I am with those games because I have some sort of coherent, like, okay, I understand what this is trying to do with the end game, and it really does seem to be the phrase that always comes up is, this game was designed with end game in mind, like, which is kind of a running meme in the looter space. And yet in this case, it does seem to be pretty true. This comes across as a game that really, really gets that it needed to launch with a coherent end game. And it has a whole bunch of dedicated content that is not recycled, that you're not just rerunning campaign missions over and over again for content. They have very dedicated arenas for this kind of stuff, whether it's fun or the drop rates are good or the gear is cool is kind of something we have yet to discover. So there are plenty of ways it could go wrong, obviously, but everything I'm seeing and hearing and the way they have kind of rolled out this marketing has been designed to appeal directly to someone like me and give me confidence that this is a game that I might not, be grinding seasonal content for every, 3 months with some new event dropping every week, but at least in the upfront here, putting a lot of time into it, and then we'll see what happens after that. I am wondering if, Outriders appealing to me is going to extend to wider popularity. I think obviously the Game Pass deal is huge, and that will very much, be a thing where that really expands the player base on Xbox in a way that, would not have been available for a $60 box copy. So I think that's going to help it a lot. I do think that there may be some hiccups for people who just like are trying to dive in and play like, a cool single player game for the story and stuff. I have not really been terribly impressed by what I've seen from the story components so far. Again, it's early, but it all seems at least as generic as Anthem, with perhaps not as good voice acting, and it seems to be kind of trying to veer into edgy comedy territory, and yet not really in a way that works, like at least some part of Borderlands works, like where that really goes in that direction. But here we have dark humor that's like kind of on the line between like actually funny and not. Again, maybe that expands as time goes on, but this is one aspect where it's hard for me to envision what I've seen so far if it expands into the larger story. People being like, yeah, that was like a hell of a, great story campaign, and I really love all these characters, and like I would be surprised if that happened. So we'll see. The other thing I think working against it is how linear it at least feels. In the intro campaign here, these segments are really broken up into kind of very linear pathways, and like here's the little hallway that goes to this combat zone, and then here's another little hallway that goes to this combat zone, and like it's not as bad as like Godfall, whereas Godfall was almost on rail. Like it had like exploration, but like there was nothing to explore and discover really, and it was keeping you very contained in these areas. And I get some of that sense from Outriders. This is not Destiny or The Division with these giant wide open spaces to explore. And well, I think there will be a lot of maps. It seems like they're going to have a lot of biomes and things like that. It does seem to be kind of very, very contained and very instanced off with the, everyone's seen the loading screens for every door you open and, gap you have to jump over, even if you're playing single player. So that to me, I think could be a potential problem. In terms of like kind of the long-term lifespan of the game, I know they keep talking about games of service, but ultimately, or not being games of service, but ultimately this depends on the game being a success or not. And if Outriders is a hit and it does, land a pretty sizable player base that is really high engagement, I guarantee you that they will make DLC for this game, probably paid DLC, like actual expansion type things rather than just like a new mission or two. It seems like this could follow a Borderlands path with like actual substantive DLC releases. I think it's smart that they're not committing to that up front and laying out some big season pass thing. I think the marketing idea to sell this as a complete game where if people like it, sure, then we'll add stuff to it, even if they're secretly maybe, drafting additional content ahead of time. And they mentioned just in passing, like, sure, we're open to new weapons, new classes, things like that. So if that happens, that could be, going to a place that some other games never got to. We never got a 5th Anthem Javelin, even though that once upon a time that was, supposed to be a thing that happened. In Borderlands 3, they didn't make any new Vault Hunters. So this could be an actual expansion, kind of in the vein of Diablo, where Diablo would add new classes with expansions over time. And I mean, for all we know, we could see a big Reaper of Souls Taken King expansion, maybe a longer timetable than the first year, but that could be in the cards in the future. So just because Outriders is saying it's not games of service, it's not live service, blah, 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 doesn't have microtransactions, that's all great, and I think that's fantastic. But I think we should still believe that if this game is a hit, they will produce more content for it. So just because, it launches with a complete endgame and whatever, I do see a situation where they can expand it essentially as much as they want. I mean, if it's a hit, they're also going to want to make a sequel. So, you have to balance what you're going to make for DLC and what you should just kind of invest in a sequel. You are so crazy today. I can't handle her. So that's kind of where I see things going here. And obviously there is the potential that this is just another big miss. And new looter IPs are very hard to break through in the space. The last 3 or 4, I'd say, have been kind of flat out failures. And it's a very tough genre to kind of get a foothold in. And even if Outriders appears to be doing almost everything right up front, it's always, a huge risk, and we can't, just because I think the game looks good and I think that it's going to satisfy a lot of looter players, I have no guarantee that will translate to a wider audience and that the game will be a sales hit for Square Enix on the level they're supposed to. Square Enix is like notoriously kind of hard on games for sales expectations. Like I remember when Tomb Raider sold several million copies, and that was still like not good enough for Square Enix or something, and that underperformed. Avengers underperformed, even though that was one of the best-selling games of its release cycle. And it's hard to know what will please Square Enix enough to make them kind of invest in either DLC or a sequel. But we won't know until we try it out. It's easy for me to see myself putting a ton of time into this game, at least in month 1. Maybe I'll max it out by then, and then I'll move on, which is fine. Again, I don't need a game to play every single week. I already have at least 2 of those going on right now. But that's kind of where I see my head is at after all of this demo stuff, after all of this preview materials. I have a fair amount of confidence in the game, and my expectations are maybe even a little higher than they should be, but I have a hard time kind of parsing anything that looks like huge red flags to me. And that has generally been true, I think, for a lot of people that I've been talking to about this, so we'll just see what happens. But those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you heard anything I said and weren't just looking at Evie running around the room the whole time. Evie, she has one new ball, and it's just the best thing of all time. So subscribe to God Rolls, my newsletter that is out tomorrow, the big recap thing of everything I've done in the week, and I will have a link to that in the description. And yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it.